The yoga retreat in Sedona was supposed to change my life. That's what the website promised. Transformation, awakening, finding your true path. $2,500 for a week of sunrise meditation and organic smoothies seemed like a bargain for enlightenment. What I found instead was the beginning of the end of everything I'd built with Thomas. I'd booked it impulsively after a particularly hard quarter at work. The stress of managing 7 sales territories had been getting to me, and when I saw the Instagram ad featuring red rocks and women in flowing white clothes looking serene, I'd entered my credit card information before I could second-guess myself. Thomas had encouraged it, even helped me pack. "You deserve this," he'd said, folding my yoga pants with the same precision he brought to everything. "Maybe you'll finally learn to touch your toes." It was such a Thomas joke. Gentle, supportive, grounded in the reality of my inflexibility. I'd laughed then, kissed him goodbye at the airport without knowing I was kissing away our entire future. I met Sage on the second day. That wasn't her real name, she told me later, but the one she'd chosen when she shed her corporate identity. She taught the afternoon vinyasa class, all flowing movements and profound observations about releasing what no longer serves you. Her words felt like prophecy. Her attention felt like recognition. By day 3, I was convinced she saw something in me that Thomas never had. "You're so much more than you know," she told me during our one-on-one session. "I can feel your potential trying to break free." "From what?" I asked, though I thought I knew. "From whatever cage you've built around yourself, or let someone else build for you." The cage. That's what my life in Milwaukee started to feel like after that conversation. A comfortable cage, sure, with Thomas and our craftsman house and our Saturday tradition of farmer's market followed by brunch. But still a cage. Thomas picked me up from the airport, flowers in hand, that same gentle smile that had made me feel safe for 7 years. He'd cleaned the house while I was gone, made my favorite lasagna, bought the expensive wine I liked but rarely splurged on. "How was it?" he asked, genuinely interested. "You look different, relaxed." "It was incredible," I said, already editing out Sage, the late-night talks about authentic living, the way she'd held my hand during the final meditation and whispered that I was meant for more than this. "Good," he said. "You needed a break. You've been stressed with the promotion." The promotion. Regional sales manager for a company that made industrial cleaning supplies. Thomas was so proud when I got it. Had thrown a surprise party with all our friends, made a toast about how I was the smartest, most capable woman he knew. Looking at him now, I felt like he was congratulating a stranger. The woman who cared about selling floor wax efficiently had evaporated somewhere between warrior pose and shavasana. "I've been thinking," I said over dinner, "about making some changes." "Like what?" He reached for my hand across the table. "Whatever you need, Rach. You know I support you." That was the problem. He did support me. Completely. Unconditionally. It should have felt like love, but suddenly it felt like enablement, like he was complicit in keeping me small. "Big changes," I said. "Life changes." "Okay," he said slowly. "Want to talk about it?" I looked at this man who'd nursed me through food poisoning, who'd driven 6 hours to my grandmother's funeral, who still left little notes in my lunch bag. And I felt nothing but impatience. He was so steady, so predictable, so unaware that the woman across from him was screaming to get out. "Not yet," I said. "I need to figure some things out first." Sage and I started texting, daily affirmations at first. "You are limitless." "Your authentic self is waiting." "Break free from the patterns that no longer serve you." Then deeper conversations about purpose and meaning. She sent me books. Women Who Run with the Wolves, The Gifts of Imperfection, Untamed. I devoured them in secret, highlighting passages that felt like permission slips. Reading them in bed while Thomas slept beside me, I felt like I was having an affair with ideas. One night, he woke up and found me crying over a chapter about women losing themselves in relationships. "What's wrong?" he asked, instantly alert, ready to solve whatever problem had me in tears at 2 a.m. "This book," I said, showing him the cover. "It's about how women dim their light to make men comfortable." He studied the book, then me. "Do I make you dim your light?" The question was so earnest, so Thomas, that I wanted to scream. He was missing the point entirely. It wasn't about what he did or didn't do. It was about the fact that I had to consider him at all. "It's not about you," I said. "Okay," he said, though I could see the hurt. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," I said. "Go back to sleep." He did, because he trusted me, because he respected my boundaries, because he was a good partner, and somehow that made it worse. "Your spirit is too big for your life," one text read. I could feel it the moment we met. Thomas noticed my distance but misattributed it to work stress. He responded the way he always did, by trying to make things easier. He took over dinner prep, handled the household errands, suggested a weekend getaway to Chicago. "We could hit that jazz club you love," he offered. "Make a real vacation of it." "Maybe," I said, thinking about how Sage had described jazz as beautiful but confined, like a bird singing in a cage. The breaking point came 3 months after Sedona. Thomas proposed, not in some grand gesture. That wasn't his style. Just the two of us on a hiking trail we'd done 100 times, fall colors painting the Wisconsin landscape. He'd packed a picnic, complete with the chocolate croissants from the bakery I loved. We'd eaten them sitting on a fallen log, watching the sun filter through maple leaves. "I want to show you something," he said, leading me to the overlook where we'd shared our first kiss 8 years ago. The view was spectacular, the forest spreading out below us in waves of gold and crimson. But I barely saw it because Thomas was dropping to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Rachel," he said, and his voice caught. "I've loved you since the day you tripped over my dog at the park. You laughed so hard you snorted, and then you were so embarrassed about snorting that you snorted again, and I thought, I need to know this woman." 8 years later, I still feel that way. Every day with you is better than the last. Every laugh, every Sunday morning, every time you steal my fries even though you said you weren't hungry, it's all perfect because it's with you. Will you marry me? The ring was perfect. Not flashy, not trying to prove anything. A simple solitaire with a band that matched my grandmother's wedding ring, which he knew I'd always admired. He'd even had it sized correctly. Of course he had. He paid attention to everything about me. Or at least everything about the me I used to be. "Thomas," I started and watched his face begin to fall. "I can't," I heard myself say. His face went through confusion, hurt, then a terrible understanding. "Because of someone else?" "Because of me," I said, the words feeling borrowed even as I spoke them. "I'm suffocating, Thomas. This life, this path we're on, it's killing everything wild in me." "Wild?" He stood up slowly, pocketing the ring. "Rach, what are you talking about?" "You wouldn't understand," I said, already angry that he was proving my point. "You're happy with ordinary, with safe, with small." "Small?" His voice was quiet. "Loving you is small?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what do you mean? Help me understand." But I couldn't, because the truth was I didn't fully understand either. I just knew that Sage's texts made me feel electric, and Thomas's steadiness made me feel trapped, that the life I'd built felt like a costume stitched for someone I no longer was. That somewhere between Sedona and this moment, I'd decided I was meant for more, even if I couldn't define what more meant. "I need to be alone," I said, "to figure out who I am without you." "You're Rachel," he said simply. "The woman who sings off key in the shower, who cries at insurance commercials, who pretends she doesn't like my mother's casserole but always has seconds. That's who you are." "That's who I've been," I corrected. But maybe that's not who I'm supposed to be. The conversation continued back at the house, circling the same drain. Thomas tried logic, then emotion, then bargaining. Would counseling help? Was it the house? Did I want to move? Was it marriage itself, or just marriage to him? Each question felt like another bar on the cage I was desperate to escape. "Just tell me what you need," he said finally, exhausted. "Tell me, and I'll give it to you." "Space," I said. "Freedom, the chance to discover who I am when I'm not being someone's girlfriend." "So we take a break, date other people?" "No," I said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than thought. "I need to leave completely, start fresh somewhere new." "Where?" "Sedona," I said, though I hadn't consciously decided until that moment. "There's something there for me, I can feel it." He laughed, but it wasn't cruel, just disbelieving. "You're going to leave your job, your home, your life to move to Arizona because of a feeling?" "Yes," I said. And somehow that single word contained all my certainty and all my doubt. The practical dissolution of our life together took 6 weeks. Thomas moved in with his brother, insisting I keep the house until I figured out my plans. Even in heartbreak, he was thinking of my comfort. I quit my job, explaining to my bewildered boss that I needed to pursue my authentic path. She'd stared at me across her desk, this woman who'd mentored me for 5 years. "Your authentic path?" she repeated. "Rachel, you're one of our best. You're up for senior director next year." "That's just a title," I said, parroting Sage's words. "I need to do something that feeds my soul." "And selling industrial cleaning supplies doesn't feed your soul?" She was being sarcastic, but also genuinely confused. "Look, take a sabbatical. 3 months. Find yourself or whatever, then come back." "I can't," I said. "I need to make a clean break." She sighed, signed the papers. "You know what feeds my soul, Rachel? My mortgage payments, my kids' college fund, the ability to take care of my aging parents. But sure, go find yourself. I hope she's worth it." I sold everything that wouldn't fit in my car. Our furniture, the kitchen gadgets we'd collected, the camping gear from trips we'd taken. Each item felt like shedding dead weight, until I picked up the cast-iron skillet Thomas had taught me to season properly. He'd been so patient, showing me how to care for it, how to build up the layers that made it perfect. "It takes time," he'd said. "But once it's right, it'll last forever." I sold it for $10 at the yard sale and cried the whole way to the bank. "Your truth?" My sister stood in what used to be our living room, watching me pack. "Rachel, what does that even mean?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "That's why I have to go." "And Thomas?" "Thomas wants me to be someone I'm not anymore." "Someone who loves him?" "Someone who's satisfied with ordinary love," I corrected. "I want extraordinary. I want passion that transforms you. I want a life that feels like art, not routine." "Thomas would have given you that," she said. "He'd have given you anything." "But I'd have had to ask," I said. "And then it wouldn't be real." The drive to Sedona took 3 days. I played music that Thomas hated, stopped wherever looked interesting, felt my new freedom expanding with every mile. By the time I saw the red rocks rising from the desert, I was convinced I'd made the right choice. This was what courage looked like. This was what choosing yourself meant. Sage was thrilled when I arrived. She helped me find a tiny apartment, introduced me to her circle of seekers and healers and artists. I picked up part-time work at a wellness center, guiding meditation sessions for tourists. My savings dwindled, but my spirit soared. This was living. This was authentic. This was who I was meant to be. Except the red rocks that had seemed magical became ordinary after a month. The profound conversations with Sage's friends started to sound like the same recycled insights. The freedom I'd chased began to feel less like flying and more like falling without a net. "I'm struggling," I admitted to Sage one evening, after another tourist asked if I had any actual certification to teach meditation, and I'd had to admit I didn't. "That's the ego-resisting transformation," she assured me. "Push through. Your breakthrough is coming. But my breakthrough felt increasingly like a breakdown. The wellness center cut my hours when tourist season ended. My car needed repairs I couldn't afford, $1,000 for a new transmission. The apartment that had seemed charmingly bohemian revealed itself as poorly maintained and overpriced. The toilet ran constantly, the air conditioning wheezed like an asthmatic, and my neighbor played drums at 3 a.m. "Universe is testing your commitment," Sage said when I complained. "Diamond pressure creates diamonds." "Pressure is making me broke," I said. "I had a savings account. I had health insurance. You had chains," she interrupted. "Now you have freedom." But freedom tasted like ramen noodles for the 5th night straight. Freedom felt like checking my bank balance and seeing double digits. Freedom looked like Sage's trust fund bankrolling her spiritual journey while she preached about letting go of material attachments. The night I called Thomas, I'd been sitting on my apartment floor because I'd sold my furniture to make rent. The red rocks glowed outside my window, beautiful and indifferent to my struggles. "Maybe I should have stayed in Milwaukee," I said one night, after a particularly sparse dinner of rice and beans. "That's fear talking," Sage said. "You can't go backward, only through." But through to what? I'd left a man who loved me, a career I'd worked years to build, a home that held our shared history, all to find myself. And what I'd found was that I was just as lost in Sedona as I'd been in Milwaukee, only now I was also broke and alone. Thomas called on what would have been our anniversary. I almost didn't answer, but loneliness won over pride. "How's Arizona?" he asked, and I could hear the genuine concern past the hurt. "Hot," I said. "How's Milwaukee?" "Cold," he said. "But you knew that." We talked for an hour. He told me about work, about our mutual friends, about the dog finally learning not to jump on visitors. Normal things, ordinary things. Things that used to bore me but now felt like water in the desert. "I'm seeing someone," he said eventually. "Thought you should know." "Oh," I said, the words small and sharp. "Her name's Julia. She's a teacher. Met her at Dan's wedding." Dan's wedding. 3 months after I left, and I hadn't even known Dan was engaged. The life I'd abandoned had continued without me, filling the space I'd left like water closing over a stone. Is it serious?" "It's new," he said carefully. "But it's good. She's good for me. Steady, knows what she wants." Unlike me, the unspoken comparison hung between us. "She sounds perfect," I said, trying not to sound bitter. "She's not perfect," he said. "She burns every grilled cheese she makes, and she's terrified of spiders. But she's present. She shows up." "I showed up," I said defensively. "You did," he agreed. "Until you didn't." "I'm happy for you," I lied. "Are you?" he asked. Did you find what you were looking for?" I looked around my empty apartment, at the vision board Sage had helped me create that now seemed childish, at the stack of self-help books that all said the same thing in different fonts, at the mirror where I'd tried so hard to see someone new but kept finding the same face, just more tired. "I'm finding myself," I said, the words hollow as a gourd. "Good," he said. "I hope you like her when you do." After we hung up, I cried for the first time since leaving Milwaukee. Not the cleansing tears Sage talked about, but ugly, grieving sobs for the life I'd thrown away. Thomas was moving on with someone who appreciated what I'd called ordinary. Someone who saw steadiness as strength, not stagnation. Someone who understood that small love, daily love, showing up love, was actually the biggest love of all. I lasted another 2 months in Sedona, 2 months of diminishing savings and increasing clarity about what I'd done. Sage grew distant when I stopped being her success story. The spiritual community that had welcomed me as a seeker had no use for a doubter. Even the red rocks seemed to judge me, ancient and unimpressed by another person who'd come west to find themselves and found only their own foolishness. The drive back to Milwaukee was nothing like the drive out. No freedom songs, no spontaneous stops, just mile after mile of reckoning with my choices. I'd left a good man to find myself. What I'd found was that myself was just as flawed and confused as ever, only now without the love that had made those flaws bearable. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. Rented a studio apartment on the south side, far from our old neighborhood. Got a job at a different company, selling different products to different clients. Started rebuilding from scratch, which is harder than building the first time because now you know what you've lost. I saw Thomas once, 6 months after my return. At the grocery store, of all places. He was with Julia, pretty in an uncomplicated way, laughing at something he'd said. She wore jeans and a brewer's t-shirt, comfortable in her own skin in a way I'd forgotten how to be. They were shopping together, but not in the performative way new couples often do. Just easy synchronization, him reaching for things on high shelves, her comparing prices on pasta sauce. They had the relaxed intimacy of people who'd found their rhythm. His hand rested easy on her back as they debated between 2 bottles of wine, the way it used to rest on mine. They were buying ingredients for what looked like a dinner party, the good olive oil, the cheese I'd taught him to like, the wine I'd introduced him to. He saw me before I could escape. His face went through surprise, concern, then something like pity. "Rachel," he said, "I heard you were back." "Yeah," I said, clutching my basket of microwave dinners. "Sedona wasn't what I thought." Julia noticed the shift in his energy, looked between us with quick understanding. "I'm going to grab those lemons," she said, touching his arm gently before walking away. Kind of her. Kinder than I'd been to anyone in this whole mess. "You okay?" he asked, and I could tell he genuinely wanted to know. "Getting there," I said. "You look happy." "I am," he said simply. She's really something. Teaches 4th grade, has them all convinced that math is actually magic in disguise. "She seems nice," I managed. "She is. Funny, too. First time she came over, she saw that wall of vinyl records and said, 'Oh, good, you're one of those guys. I was worried you might be interesting.'" He smiled at the memory. Made me laugh harder than I had in months. Since I left. He didn't say it, but we both heard it. "I'm sorry," I said. "For how I left, for what I said. You weren't small or ordinary. You were everything. I just couldn't see it." "I know," he said sadly. "You just couldn't see it." "Do you think—" I started, then stopped. What was I asking? For forgiveness? For a second chance? For him to leave the woman who made him laugh and come back to the one who'd made him cry? "I think you had to go," he said, reading my unfinished question. "You'd have always wondered, always felt trapped. It wouldn't have been fair to either of us." "But I was wrong," I said. "About all of it. About you, about us, about what I needed." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe you were right to go and just wrong about why. Maybe we weren't meant to last forever. Maybe we were just meant to teach each other things." "What did I teach you?" I asked, genuinely curious. He thought for a moment. That love isn't enough by itself. That you can't make someone see your value if they're determined to look elsewhere. That sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do. "And you taught me that ordinary moments are actually extraordinary," I said. "That showing up is everything. That a good partner is worth more than some abstract idea of transformation. I just learned it too late." Julia returned then, carrying lemons and a quiet awareness. She slipped her hand into Thomas's as naturally as breathing. No performance, no marking territory. Just a woman reaching for her person. "This is Rachel," Thomas said. "Rachel Julia." "Nice to meet you," Julia said, and seemed to mean it. Up close I could see what Thomas saw. Intelligence in her eyes, humor in the curve of her mouth, the quiet confidence of someone who knew her worth without needing to announce it. "You too," I said. "Take care of him?" "We take care of each other," she said simply, and the correction was gentle but clear. Partnership, not caretaking. Balance, not dependence. They left together, Thomas's hand finding the small of her back again as they navigated their cart through the store. I watched them go, saw him say something that made her throw her head back and laugh. The sound was bright and unself-conscious, filling the produce section with joy. That's what I'd thrown away. Not just Thomas, but the possibility of being the person who made him smile in grocery stores. The chance to be someone's Julia, steady and present and sure. I'd traded it all for the promise of becoming extraordinary, only to discover that extraordinary was just another word for alone. I abandoned my cart and drove home to my empty apartment, where the only transformation waiting was the slow recognition of what finding yourself really costs when you lose everyone else in the process. The woman in my mirror looks the same as she did in Milwaukee. Same face, same eyes, same restless heart that mistook contentment for complacency. But now she knows something she didn't before, that finding yourself is worthless if you have no one to share the discovery with. That ordinary love is extraordinary when you realize how rare it is. That good men aren't cages, they're homes. And I burned mine down because I confused safety with suffocation. My name is Rachel, and I left a good man to find myself. What I found was that myself was never lost. I just hadn't liked the person I was. So I ran to Sedona, to Sage, to some imaginary version of me that didn't need anyone or anything. But that woman doesn't exist. The only real me is the one who had love and threw it away, who had a life and called it small, who had a future and traded it for a feeling that evaporated in the desert sun. I found myself, all right, the woman who trades a good man for an abstract concept, who chooses poetry over prose, forgetting that a good life is mostly prose, daily, ordinary, necessary prose, who sees steadiness as weakness instead of strength, who has to lose everything to understand its worth. The Wellness Center in Sedona probably has some saying about this, about lessons learned and growth achieved and becoming who you're meant to be. But I know the truth now. I was already who I was meant to be. I just convinced myself she wasn't enough, and in trying to become more, I became so much less. Thomas is married now. I know because I looked up the announcement online. The photo shows them laughing, Julia's head thrown back, Thomas looking at her like she's his whole world. The way he used to look at me, before I decided his world was too small. They honeymooned in Chicago, at the jazz club I'd called a beautiful cage. Sometimes the cage is just a room where music lives. Sometimes it's not confinement, it's continuity. Sometimes it's not a prison, it's a promise. But you can't learn that in Sedona. You can only learn it in Milwaukee, in a grocery store, seeing the life you threw away in someone else's cart. Finding yourself where you started, but emptier. Knowing exactly who you are now, and wishing you were anyone else.